A handful of loaves and fish feeding thousands. Divine miracle or something more? The story of the multiplication of the loaves challenges our logic and faith. Is it a supernatural feat or a powerful lesson about the human capacity for sharing? Get ready to unravel one of the most fascinating mysteries in the Bible. To truly grasp the magnitude of the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves, whether literal or symbolic, we need to transport ourselves to first-century Galilee and understand the socioeconomic and geographical context that served as its backdrop. Life there was, for the most part, rural. People depended on subsistence farming and fishing in the Sea of Galilee to survive. Villages were small and isolated, and journeys between them were long, exhausting, and almost always on foot. The crowds following Jesus were not well-prepared tourists. They were peasants, fishermen, artisans, and their families, drawn by his revolutionary teachings and miraculous healings. Many came from distant villages, without the facilities we have today. Imagine the journey. Hours under the scorching sun, without easy access to drinking water or food. Carrying provisions for several days was a luxury few could afford, and the lack of refrigeration meant that perishable food would spoil quickly. The constant worry about the next meal was a brutal reality. At the end of an exhausting day of preaching and healing, collective hunger became an urgent problem. The biblical narrative highlights the disciples' concern who, with their practical vision, suggest that Jesus dismissed the crowd so they could go to nearby villages to buy food. This proposal was not just a matter of convenience. It was a vital necessity. Hunger, if left unchecked, could easily lead to despair, disorder, and the dispersion of the people, compromising Jesus' message. It is at this point of crisis that Jesus, with a perspective that transcends human logic, challenges his disciples to feed everyone. Their response is revealing. They point to the scarcity of resources, mentioning that not even 200 denarii would be enough to buy bread for such a vast multitude. Amidst this disheartening assessment, the figure of a boy emerges with his humble offering, 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. The contrast between the insignificance of this offering and the immensity of the crowd, estimated at 5,000 men, not counting women and children, establishes the dramatic tension of the miracle. This setting of scarcity and the urgency of hunger not only establish the foundation for the central theme but also amplify the wonder of what followed. It forces us to confront human limitations and consider how, amidst scarcity, something extraordinary can happen, whether through divine intervention or a profound transformation in human nature. Preparing the stage is essential for the miracle, in whatever form it takes, to shine in its fullness and make us reflect on the true nature of provision. If the multiplication of the loaves was, in its essence, a catalyst for sharing, then the manifestations of this hidden generosity are at the heart of understanding the event. The biblical narrative presents us with a crucial moment that acts as an emotional and moral trigger, the offering of a boy. With his small portion of 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, he gives everything he has. This act, seemingly insignificant in the face of the vast hungry crowd, becomes a powerful detonator of a collective transformation. In a society where hospitality and sharing were ingrained cultural values, but often suppressed by scarcity and the primary instinct of self-preservation, the boy's unassuming attitude and Jesus' subsequent action would have a profound impact. Imagine the scene. Thousands of hungry people, some perhaps with small portions of food hidden, reluctant to reveal their scarce resources for fear of not having enough for themselves. The sight of Jesus blessing the little that there was, and then instructing his disciples to distribute it may have broken down the barrier of selfishness and shame that prevented the manifestation of solidarity. Jesus' act of taking the loaves and fish, giving thanks, and distributing them through his disciples was not just a ritualistic gesture. It was a powerful performative act that could trigger a mass response. The expectation of an imminent miracle, or the simple belief that something extraordinary will happen under Jesus' leadership, may have led people to act in unexpected ways, revealing resources they would previously have kept hidden. It would not be a magic multiplication in the sense of creating matter out of nothing, but a multiplication of the spirit of sharing. Those who had food hidden in their bags, baskets, or under their clothes, inspired by the boy's altruistic example and Jesus' loving authority, began to reveal what they possessed. Hunger, which was once a factor of individualism and competition, transformed into a catalyst for solidarity. The shame of having and not sharing was replaced by the desire to contribute to the collective well-being. The idea that everyone has something to give overcame the fear of scarcity. Thus, what seemed to be an insurmountable scarcity revealed itself to be latent abundance, released by the courage of a boy and the inspiration of a leader. This chapter illustrates how generosity, often hidden by need or fear, can flourish in an environment of faith and mutual trust. It is the manifestation of a deep spiritual principle, that the offering of one, however small, can inspire generosity in many, transforming apparent scarcity into real abundance, not by a magic trick, but by a profound change of heart and behavior, a true collective awakening. To unravel the mystery of the multiplication of the loaves from a perspective that goes beyond the purely supernatural, it is fundamental to explore the laws of crowd psychology and how faith, in this context, can shape collective perception and behavior. Faith, here, transcends mere religious belief. It encompasses unwavering trust in the figure of Jesus as a charismatic leader, a miraculous healer, and a transformative teacher. When a vast multitude gathers around a figure of authority and inspiration like Jesus, individuals tend to operate under a different dynamic than what governs them in isolation. The crowd is not simply the sum of its individuals. It acquires a kind of mind of its own, where emotions, ideas, and behaviors can be intensely contagious. In a scenario of widespread hunger and miraculous expectation, as in the multiplication, the crowd becomes highly suggestible and receptive to stimuli that promise relief or hope. The intrinsic authority of Jesus, combined with the deep faith he inspired in his followers, created fertile ground for this dynamic. When Jesus takes the few loaves and fish, blesses them, and instructs his disciples to distribute them, he's not just performing a religious act. He's executing a powerful performative act that can trigger a mass response. The expectation of an imminent miracle, or the simple belief that something extraordinary will happen under Jesus' leadership, may have led people to act in unexpected ways, revealing resources they would previously keep hidden. The phenomenon of groupthink, or social influence, may have played a crucial role. If an individual, inspired by Jesus' gesture or by the example of others, begins to reveal their own provisions, which might have been hidden due to shame, fear, or a self-preservation instinct, others may feel compelled to do the same. This doesn't happen by coercion, but by an emergent sense of community, of solidarity, and of belonging to a group that is acting in unison to overcome a common difficulty. Hunger, once a factor of isolation and individualism, transforms into a catalyst for cooperation and generosity. The laws here are not those of Newtonian physics, but those that govern the collective mind, suggestibility, social mimicry, and the power of an inspiring leader. Faith in Jesus, therefore, acts as the catalyst that unleashes these psychological and social dynamics. It is not just belief in the divine that is relevant, but how this belief manifests in concrete actions on the human plane. Faith may have been the trigger that released hidden generosity, transforming a gathering of hungry individuals into a sharing community, and what seemed like an insoluble problem into an impressive demonstration of human cooperation and a change of mindset. At the heart of the enigma of the multiplication of the loaves lies one of the most fascinating and debated dichotomies of biblical interpretation. Was it a literal material miracle, where matter was supernaturally created or multiplied by divine power, or a powerful spiritual metaphor, symbolizing the transformation of the human spirit and the inspiration to share. Delving into this question means immersing ourselves in the different ways of understanding the divine, the human, and the relationship between them. The literal miracle perspective maintains that the event was a direct and supernatural intervention by Jesus that defied and transcended known natural laws. For proponents of this view, the multiplication of the loaves and fish is irrefutable proof of Jesus' divinity and his absolute power over creation. They argue that the Bible describes the event clearly and unambiguously as a supernatural act, where matter was not just reorganized or revealed. It was created ex nihilo, or exponentially expanded by divine power. This interpretation emphasizes the omnipotence of God and Jesus' ability to perform the impossible, serving as an unequivocal sign of his divine nature and his sovereign control over the physical world. For many believers, this is the only possible interpretation, as any other would diminish Jesus' power, the veracity of the Scriptures, and the nature of his messianic mission. Faith, in this case, is the acceptance of an event that defies scientific logic and human reason. In contrast, the spiritual metaphor proposes that the miracle occurred in the realm of human transformation and social dynamics. This interpretation does not deny Jesus' power, but redirects it to his extraordinary ability to inspire and catalyze generosity and solidarity. The multiplication would not be of physical loaves themselves, but of the will to share. It is argued that Jesus' magnetic presence and his act of blessing the few foods would have disarmed the selfishness and shame that kept provisions hidden, leading people to reveal what they had with them. The miracle, from this perspective, lies in the breaking down of individual barriers and the emergence of mass solidarity. It is a testament to the power of compassion and the It is a testament to the power of compassion and the transformative influence of a leader who inspires the community to act for the benefit of all. This view emphasizes human responsibility and the potential for inner transformation, suggesting that the true miracle is humanity's ability to overcome scarcity and misery through sharing, loving one's neighbor, and collective action. Both interpretations have profound implications for theology and practical life. The literal miracle reinforces divine transcendence and God's direct intervention in the world, offering comfort and hope in supernatural providence. The spiritual metaphor highlights divine immanence and God's power acting through human action, calling individuals to responsibility and social action. The choice between these views is not merely academic. It shapes how individuals perceive faith, the nature of miracles, the role of religion in society, and the application of Jesus' teachings in their own lives. It is an invitation to a deeper analysis not only of the event itself, but of what it reveals about faith, humanity, and the power of transformation, whether wrought by a divine act or by the inspiration of the human spirit. The narrative of the multiplication of the loaves, regardless of whether it is interpreted as a literal miracle or an inspiration for sharing, transcends time and resonates with palpable urgency in our days. It becomes a mirror for our own reality, especially when we confront the persistent and paradoxical scourge of global hunger in a world of apparent abundance and waste. On a planet where, shockingly, billions of people still suffer from chronic food insecurity, while vast quantities of food are produced and often discarded. The story of Jesus feeding the multitude acquires new and powerful layers of meaning. If the multiplication was the awakening of generosity and the revelation of hidden resources, it forces us into a collective and individual self-examination. Where are the 5 loaves and 2 fish that we have stored in our own society? This question goes far beyond food. It extends to the vast resources we possess as humanity. Advanced technology, scientific knowledge accumulated over centuries, disproportionately concentrated wealth, and unprecedented productive capacity. If these resources were shared more equitably, efficiently, and with a humanitarian purpose. The eradication of hunger and misery on a global scale would not be a distant utopia, but a tangible and achievable reality. The lesson of multiplication urges us to look beyond apparent scarcity and to recognize the abundance that exists when there is a spirit of solidarity and cooperation. Modern initiatives to combat hunger are direct echoes of this ancient principle. Food banks which rescue surplus production and distribute it to those in need, minimizing waste. Sustainable agriculture programs which empower local communities to produce their own food autonomously and resiliently. And donation and volunteer campaigns which mobilize individuals to contribute their time, talents, and financial resources are contemporary and global manifestations of multiplication. These efforts seek to catalyze sharing, mobilize resources, and feed entire communities, not through a supernatural act, but through coordinated and inspired human action. The idea that everyone has something to offer, even if it is a little in the face of immense need, manifests in every person who volunteers their time at a community kitchen, in every company that redirects surplus food to charities, and in every government that implements public policies for food security and waste reduction. The individual contribution, however small it may seem, adds up to a collective effort that can impact the lives of millions, transforming despair into hope, starvation into nutrition, and helplessness into dignity. Thus, the story of the multiplication of the loaves, regardless of its exact nature, serves as a continuous and urgent invitation to action and reflection. It reminds us that, in the face of need, we have the power, and perhaps the undeniable moral duty, to look at what we have and not just what we lack. It inspires us to be catalysts for generosity, to promote sharing in all spheres of life. It is an appeal to shared responsibility for a more just and abundant future. The story of the multiplication of the loaves, like many great narratives that permeate humanity's spiritual and philosophical traditions, confronts us with a fundamental and often uncomfortable truth: the existence of limits to human understanding and the ubiquitous presence of an infinite mystery that permeates the very fabric of reality. No matter which interpretation we prefer, that of the literal miracle or that of the spiritual metaphor, the essence of the event challenges our ability to encapsulate it in a single rational, scientific, and exhaustive explanation. If we accept the perspective of the literal miracle, we are compelled to acknowledge the existence of a power that transcends the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology that are, as yet, known to us. The creation of matter out of nothing, or its exponential multiplication from an infinitesimal portion, operates outside the parameters of our science and our empirical logic. This invites us to a profound intellectual humility, admitting that there are dimensions of reality that may be beyond our capacity for measurement, analysis, and purely materialistic explanation. It is a vivid reminder of our finitude and the limitations of our knowledge in the face of what is potentially infinite and unfathomable. For many, this acceptance of the inexplicable is an act of faith that opens doors to a broader understanding of the universe, the nature of the divine, and the interconnectedness of all that exists. If, on the other hand, the multiplication is seen as a manifestation of human generosity inspired by Jesus, it reveals to us the unexplored depth of human potential for goodness, solidarity, and collective transformation. Even from this perspective, the way this inspiration spread to thousands of people, transforming a situation of absolute scarcity into abundance through sharing, still carries an element of wonder that defies simple psychological or sociological analysis. There is something intrinsic to human nature, a primordial call to connection and compassion, that emerges with overwhelming force in moments of crisis and under the leadership of truly inspiring figures. The ability of a single act of generosity to trigger a wave of sharing in a hungry crowd is, in itself, a kind of social and spiritual miracle that transcends the mere logic of individualism and scarcity. The story of the multiplication of the loaves, therefore, is not just an account of a distant past event, but a mirror that reflects our own capacity to experience and create miracles, be they literal on the divine plane or spiritual on the human plane, and our relationship with the inexplicable. It invites us to remain in a state of awe and reverence, to recognize that not everything can be reduced to scientific formulas, algorithms, or rational explanations. It reminds us that faith, goodness, compassion, and the ability to transcend egoism can operate on levels that we are still unraveling, pointing to a reality that is vaster, more complex, and infinitely more mysterious than our finite minds can conceive. It is a window into the infinite, an invitation to contemplate what lies beyond our immediate grasp, and to accept that some of life's greatest mysteries reside at the sublime intersection between the human and the divine. The story of the multiplication of the loaves echoes through the centuries, leaving us with a final, timeless question. What, in fact, was multiplied on that fateful day? Was it loaves and fish in an act of divine creation? Or was it unwavering faith and the latent generosity of humanity that manifested in a powerful act of sharing? The mystery remains, hanging over us, inviting us to a deep reflection on the power of solidarity, the human capacity for overcoming, and the grandeur of a gesture that, even today, continues to feed not only bodies but also souls. May this story continue to inspire us to seek abundance in sharing and to marvel at the inexplicable.